Going guys, so today we're here with another video, and I just got a lot of gear, which is sweet. I got a mic stand, I got a Samson CO1 studio condenser mic, and I got a pop filter, and I'm still waiting on oh yeah, and I have like a Scarlett um, uh, what is it, XLR audio interface thing, so I can plug this in and hopefully have better audio quality, and not to mention also do some cool music stuff too, which I'm really excited about. But today what we're going to be talking about besides that is that we're going to be talking about the 12 trials of Hercules. It's a little different from what we've been doing, and I was just digging into some of the mythology and stuff because I'm kind of into philosophy and metaphysics and stuff, and just seeing a whole bunch of interesting commentary about contradictions in the storylines, or what some of these um, you know quote unquote people or gods represent is very interesting to me. So let's dig into it. Let's start with the 12 trials of Hercules. So basically, it kind of starts out where Hercules is the kind of the bastard grandson of Zeus, and Zeus's wife doesn't really like that, so she curses uh, Hercules with a curse of madness. Okay, madness, craziness. Like if somebody pleads insanity and then they do something ridiculous, right? Well, they're treated differently in the legal system than somebody who was completely competent, somebody who maybe existed psychopathic tendencies. They're treated differently because one knew that it was wrong, the other was completely delusional and foolish, right? Well, they're both foolish, it's just that one doesn't know, right? That's the key. So, this entire progression, if we say that, okay, this madness and his redemption story is based on foolishness and not knowing or ignorance, right? Then we could say, okay, so Hercules' trials are symbolic of the progression of becoming wiser and more knowledgeable. And at a certain point, they become a transcendent principle themselves, right? Or at least the idea of what that means, right? And transcendent principle, like these are just ideas that we can exemplify in our life. So if we pursue this and become like Hercules, we become one of the greatest mythological characters. Um, that would be very interesting to have these characteristics in our life that would probably make us great people. So let's get into it. So the first one, so he did this horrific act of, it's just a symbol of horrific things, right? So imagine somebody being a fool and just, whatever, but fill in the blank. But Hercules murdered his family because he went crazy, and so his entire progression is resolving it. So then he moves, goes to the Oracle, gets some advice. Then he goes to his cousin, which is a king, who's a king, and he has to go through all these trials in order to get a redemption, right? Now he has to subjugate his pride to wisdom and knowledge, right? So he's willing to basically work for somebody that he doesn't really feel is his equal, okay? That might be it. So he's subjugating his pride for knowledge and wisdom. That's very important. Next one. So his first trial is that he has to defeat the lion, the impervious lion that captures maidens and consumes men. Okay, well, if we think about that, what is the lion? Well, we could say that base desires, but desire is reflected by Eros, right? He would be in this story, but that's not true, right? It's like the primal aspects of our nature, bringing it in, because you can't, because imagine, because the primal aspects, a lion, right? Well, a lion we consider have courage, and that's kind of the symbology, right? If we have courage, we are invincible to, or impervious, or we become impervious, right? The lion's mane is impervious to arrow fire, impervious to all these things, and these are just ideas, right? So he went in there, went in the cave, like allegory of the cave style with Plato. He went in the cave, what was dark, had all these bones and stuff, and then he shot an arrow, woke it up, just irritated it, and then he swung the club, hit it in the face, stunned it, and then choked it out, right? So what is he doing? Well, he's not touching the great characteristics of the mane of the impervious, hide, he's killing and suffocating the primal aspects of ourselves in subservience to wisdom. And this is also exemplified when, after he kills it, he takes the claw of the beast and uses it to demarcate what is useful from the lion and what is not. Right? The impervious nature, the courage, the force, the invulnerability. He uses the claw itself, the beast, the desires that we all have, not desires, but like the primal instincts that we all have, and he uses it to cut what is good and what is bad at the recommendation of Athena, the god of wisdom. Okay, so we can bring these aspects, because they're not bad in themselves, but we can bring them in subjugation to our quest for knowledge and wisdom, which is cool. Goes back, completes that trial. Second one, let's see. Okay, this one's the Hydra one. This is the one that kind of is in the Disney story. So basically, he has his brother or whatever. They go into the swamp, lure him out from the cave. Again, there's that cave symbology. Comes out, heads pop up. He crushes them, but they grow back twice as strong as before, until they get the idea of cauterizing it. Now, fire represents the will, right? So they cauterize all these wounds and prevent them from growing back. So they cut off all the heads and cauterize them. Well, the creature is still alive. So what Hercules does, since all these heads are representations of fears in our life, so that's why it makes sense that he went for the lion first and then went for the Hydra, because if you have courage and you use that indomitable strength, right, from our base primal instincts to then fight fears in servience to wisdom and knowledge, isn't that good? Of course. So then they cauterize all those things, then they kill by crushing it the common source, which is the beast, right? So imagine you have the body, and then you have all the heads sticking out, and they just keep replicating or whatever, but then you get to the main problem, right? And the main problem is that a lot of fears, well, we've already talked about this with, fear protects you from death, so it just draws an association. So what you're doing is that you're really just killing the association that wisdom and knowledge, or the change towards wisdom and knowledge, has with death, right? That's all you're doing, right? It's not just killing all fear, because then you do stupid stuff, right? And his goal is wisdom and knowledge. So they do that. Then he soaks his arrows in the blood of the Hydra, which is basically the life force of fear, and uses that as a tool against his other adversaries. Interesting. So he uses fear as a tool to help his situation move forward. Interesting. Just like we've talked about. What is it? What's the next one? Okay, the boar. Oh wait. Then he goes back, does that stuff. Then he's assigned the boar. So basically, what that represents is strength, because the only way to defeat it is to weaken it. Right. So the boar represents strength. So what he does is that he just tires out the boar. He expends all his strength, and then brings the boar alive to the king. And that's the end of that story. So he dragged the boar, or chased the boar into the snow where it couldn't move as quickly and had to use a lot of energy in order to move. And that tired it out, and he was able to capture it. So if you have a problem, you just chase it, you just keep pursuing it, and eventually the fear and whatever you're chasing will relinquish, and you'll have it. He chased it until it couldn't run anymore, right? So imagine those crazy, like imagine chasing an antelope for 25 miles. People actually do this. They chase antelope for like 25 miles, and the antelope just keels over, like dying of exhaustion. I'm pretty sure there's tribes in the world that do that. I'm not sure, but there's probably out there. The next one is the Artemis's deer or something like that. The horns are made of gold, and the hooves are made of iron. Now that is symbolic of, well, imagine Artemis is the, I'm going to say, sister to Apollo, and Apollo represents the enlightened being, right? So they have the same similar characteristics because they both came from the same kind of source-ish. And so Artemis has 5 of those deer. 4 pull her chariot, and the last one's free to roam. Why? Because if you have, because the hooves represent, you know, uh, base knowledge, like unintelligible, and then the horns and the gold represent like higher wisdom and knowledge. And so, in comparison to the absolute principle, that's why it's so elusive. It also has the quality of being elusive. So he pursues it for a year, and then eventually gets to the point where he shoots an arrow, and it no longer can run away from him, right? Because imagine you're comparing yourself with somebody who has an incredible skill set, and then you're like, oh yeah, I beat him, and then you look for the next, and then you see somebody else who's maybe 5 years away from that, and there's so much, so killing in that field that they're in that you're trying to pursue, and then it's just like this illusion to accomplishment that just keeps going, right? So he pursues it, and then he captures it. He captures what he needs, what is best, and no more, right? He doesn't kill it. He just captures it for the goal that he's going for, his redemption, his quote unquote pursuit of wisdom. And Artemis is like, and the reason why that particular uh, deer or something like that is free is because it's the wisest one, right? Because you can only be free if you're wise, right? Because imagine, imagine the lion, right? The lion has no impulse control. It's completely reactive. There's no free will. It's just acting. It's just being an animal. It's just being a beast. It's just being what it is, right? It's in the moment, can't think, it can't reflect, it can't make better decisions in the future. It's basically cannot become wiser, right? So, if something is wise, or is at least the representation of wisdom, because it comes from Artemis, who also has the same source as Apollo, that one can be free. That's it, okay? So he takes it back, then it's set free, and it's free to be illusion, as much as you want, right? What is it that means? The next one. Okay, so all these, and then the next one was basically the king sent him to clean stables, to clean trash, right? So it taught him being humble, right? Because he wanted to do that to break the pride of the hero, to do something that he never would have thought you know, thought was decent, or at least uh, deserving of somebody of his stature as basically a deity, right? But he did it because he wanted to become wise. He wanted to redeem themselves. Everything's in subservience to wisdom and the pursuit of it. So he goes, and then he talks to the king, and he makes a deal. Hey, I want 10% of the thing if I can clean out, 10% of the cattle if I can clean out the stable in a day. And he's like, you're on. So Hercules diverts the waters, the river, and directs all the water to basically flush out the stable. It's like a giant, um, horrible. Oh my gosh! Imagine all the health code violations today. But he did it. He cleaned out the stables, and you know, in one day, right? So what does the water represent? Well, the water probably represents a lot of the time represents a type of like emotion. So things of the mind. Also, not just emotion, but like you could say consciousness or the awareness. It's like directing your awareness and your emotion towards a problem and cleaning out things that may or may not be helpful is not just its own reward in terms of pursuing wisdom, but can actually manifest material rewards. Because imagine back in the day, you had 10% of an entire king's cattle stock. That's money, bro. That's money, all right? So imagine you had that. You just, by cleaning out your stuff, you not only get the reward of wisdom, but you get the reward of monetary gain or whatever that represents to you, whatever you're trying to pursue. And it's all squeaky clean, man. Awesome. But the king defaults on his debt, so there's a huge fight. So basically, also Hercules enforces contracts, right? So if somebody makes a deal with you, you enforce contracts, right? With of course, you have to go with the lines of, what is a contract. But if somebody, does that stuff to you, enforce it. That's the boundary, right? He also fights. He's not afraid to fight, okay? And, when you think of the Ares principle, which we could get into another video, it makes perfect sense. What's the next one? Let's see what time we're at. We're about 15. So we're about maybe halfway through the trials, a little bit before halfway. And so in the next video, we're going to be talking about the other half, which will be very interesting, and I think you'll really love it. Looking forward to seeing you then.